right, let's get like a little bit weird. I've never been to prison, really. But I do have a brain. So my prison, a lot of times, has been in my brain. Let me explain this to you. When I was little, when I was about 4 or 5, I used to be what I called a urination ninja. Like, I would pee everywhere. And I don't just mean everywhere. Like, I would find a little corner, a little shadow to pee in, and I would go there, and it was such a relief to me because I could never pee enough. Like, I always felt like I had to pee. Like, I mean, I know guys and girls' anatomy is different, but basically, like, the way it's set up, like, you shake a little bit when you're done, but, like, I always felt like there was more to shake out and that more could be released. Like, there's always some in the tank, if you know what I'm saying. Okay? So I was always worried that I had to pee. And this didn't always have great results. Like, one time, I ducked behind a column behind a hotel in Washington, D.C., and I was in the process of doing this very quickly, and an older gentleman grabbed my arm, which I realize now was completely inappropriate, and walked over to my mom and said, "Do you know what your son was just doing?" And I was completely embarrassed that now they had found out my secret, and I couldn't do this anymore. So as I got older, I got better at using a toilet, and I would go to the actual bathroom. But what I found here is that what started to happen in my mind is now, after I was done using the bathroom, I would start to think about washing my hands a lot. So I would wash my hands once, and then I would say, "You didn't do it well enough, Steve. You need to do it again." So I'd wash my hands again. And I'd still say, like, "You know what? You still haven't done it well enough. What do you want to get other people sick?" And I'd keep doing it until I couldn't take it anymore, and I'd leave the bathroom. And this wasn't a problem until I got to be like a teenager in high school, and I sort of had a little bit of a breakdown. And for a little while, when I was at the end of my freshman year, going into my sophomore year, I was extremely depressed. You know, like the darkest that you can go. Somehow, like, just I charged my way through it. After my freshman year of high school, I was ranked second in my class at Father Judge High School out of like 300, something I was super proud of. But I was so depressed the next year that I dropped down to like 50, but I was still like making it through. I was still doing okay. So I get to my senior year, and again I have one of these moments, and I talk to my parents about it, and we go to the doctor, and they diagnose me with depression. So they give me some medicine for that. So I go to college, and things are going well for a couple years, and I'm trying this out, and I think freedom's a funny thing because sometimes destiny steps in. So when I was a sophomore in college again, I got it into my head. I was a little bit older, a little bit more of an adult, and I said to myself, like, I need to do something about this. If I don't, it's going to be a problem. So I went to the counseling center where I went to college at the University of Scranton, woot woot, and the counselor there gave me this really good book by this really great author named Edna Foa. And it turns out that Edna Foa works at the #1 Center for the Treatment and the Study of Anxiety at the University of Pennsylvania. So when I was home for Christmas break my summer break my sophomore year, I emailed Edna Foa. I found her on the internet. And she emailed me back. And she said, "Why don't you come in to our center and we'll check you out." So I got an expansive test. It turns out they diagnosed me with moderately severe obsessive compulsive disorder. And so there's this big scale that goes 0 to 40, Yale-Brown obsessive compulsive scale. It took me like 2.5 hours to take. I had like a 22, which isn't awful, but still, needs to be dealt with. And I found out that the treatment was impossible to afford. My parents' insurance didn't cover it, and this was the best center in the world, and now I can't get this treatment. But they called me up and they said, a couple weeks later, they said, "You qualified for a special program where you can get the entire treatment for free," which was great. And it was like, unlike any therapy that I had ever been to or ever tried, therapy had never worked for me before. But now I went to this program, and instead of just sitting and talking, we did things. Like the first thing that he said to me was, "You can't wash your hands for the next 3 months," which was crazy to me. I'm sorry to be crude, but like, when you poop, you have to wash your hands. And like he wants me not to do that for several months. And so I didn't. And eventually I became okay with it. And eventually I started to get better. And by the time I left the program, you remember the original score I got was a 22. The score I got by the time I left was an 11, which means that had I entered the program at that point, I wouldn't have even qualified for the study. The symptoms were that unrecognizable. And now, I'm still occasionally in prison, but at least I have a key to the cell. Thank you.
Steve, everybody.